to Lair the Alchemist, where we discuss all things heavy metal and hard rock. Well, the day is here. The new Iron Maiden album, Senjutsu, has arrived. It's got to be the most biggest release of the year so far. Iron Maiden, the biggest metal band in the world, one of the biggest metal bands in the world. When they put out a new album, it's a big deal. It seems like this one it seems like it wasn't that long ago that they announced that this new album was coming. It seemed like it was almost like a little bit of a surprise, and it came on really quickly. Like just a couple of days ago, I looked and I was like, whoa, the new album's coming out this Friday. It actually caught me off guard a little bit. So my vinyl hasn't arrived yet. It's in the mail. It's coming. But so this morning I took a long hour and 20-minute walk, because that's how long the album is. Put it on my Amazon Music HD, so I was getting lossless streaming. In fact, better than CD quality streaming of the album, and just took it all in. And I wanted to do this video. I just got back, literally listened to it beginning to end, just got back about 30 minutes ago. And I wanted to make this video to catch sort of this my initial thoughts, my raw impressions of the record, kind of a Christmas morning, right after you've opened up all your gifts feeling. And that's what this album feels like to me. It's like a gift, a present or something. It is. I absolutely loved it. It was so enjoyable. I'm not ready to rank it yet, because I've only given it one listen. But man, it's going to rank up high for me, especially out of the last, what I call the Return of Bruce era, the Rob era albums. This is going to rank up really high, if not be a good contender for my #1 spot, in the Rob era of the band. And it's amazing to think that this is their 17th studio album. And it's been 6 years since their last album, Book of Souls. And that just floored me when I thought about, man, where was I 6 years ago? Where was the world 6 years ago? How much has changed? And for me personally, this album, man, it comes at a perfect time. And again, it feels like sort of Christmas morning here, and you just opened up a gift and it was everything you were hoping it would be. I made my video of expectations for these sort of classic legendary bands, and I talked about how with a band like Iron Maiden, I sort of temper my expectations a little bit. But here, this exceeded what I was expecting, and I'm just really happy. I really enjoyed it. Here again, I seem like, a giddy kid on Christmas morning. So let's get into it, all right? I'm not going to do my typical track-by-track in-depth thing on the tracks, because I've only listened to the album once so far. So this is going to be sort of more of an overview of my general thoughts. The album has a really cool, heavy, as in mood and dark vibe to it. Maybe like A Matter of Life and Death, which is one of my favorite of the last so many records from the band. And I like that kind of vibe, and it sort of carries through a lot of pretty much all of the album, in my opinion. And it works for me. The other thing is that, now, okay, if you're somebody and when I did my videos on the two lead-off singles, there were some people that will comment, everything that they've done after 1988 is garbage. If you're one of those people that only likes the 80s stuff, you're probably not going to like this album. Because to me, it is a continuation of where the band has been since Bruce came back into the band. In my opinion, it's a lot of elements really coming together and working very well. It feels like they've been building to this album. Now, I'm somebody who, my heart is in the 80s stuff. That's when I started listening to them. Those are my favorite albums. I like the newer stuff, Brave New World on, but I do find some flaws in those records, and I've talked about them in the past. Song lengths, songs needing to be edited, maybe better production, some mismatched songwriting, not up to maybe up to where I'd like it to be. But again, I like those albums. So I'm somebody that's sort of in between. I love the 80s, but I do also like the newer stuff. But I understand that there's some of the newer stuff has its flaws. This album for me takes what they've been doing for the last so many records, and it really kind of comes together. And one of the big things for me is instead, one of the complaints I have about the other of the last so many records is that the songs are too long, that they need to be edited. There's too much repetition, too many guitar solos, the red and the black. I got blasted for that by a bunch of people. Bruce taking a chorus and repeating the line over and over and over. No more lies, no more lies, you know, things like that that just could have, a producer should have helped them edit. But on here, so the response to that when people talk about this is usually, well, this is where Iron Maiden's at. They're a progressive band now. And my thoughts on that were always, these songs from the other albums, they're not progressive. They were just too long. Some of them, not all of them. Some of them, they're not progressive. They're just too long. They're too repetitive. But here, there's plenty of long songs on this album, but there's a lot of changes. There's a lot of tempo changes. There's a lot of key changes, feel changes. Melodies coming in, new melodies and new riffs coming in. And to me, that really makes it work. To me, that is progressive. When you have these kind of, it's something that I love, what I call gear shift changes, where you've got a riff going, then all of a sudden it goes slower, faster, it changes feel, or something just sort of comes out of nowhere and you're like, whoa. And there were a bunch of moments on the record that were like that for me, where I was like, wow, like it just sort of changed into another section, and it doesn't sound awkward or anything. It works, and you're like, wow, that's really cool, and it grabs your attention and it keeps you engaged in some of these longer songs. So this is, in my opinion, some of the best progressive stuff that they have done on this record. Maybe even going back to A Matter of Life and Death. I thought there was a lot of really great progressive type stuff on that album too. The production, now this has been a complaint of mine with some of the other albums, and I like the production. I wish there was a little more clarity on the top end. It feels a little like dull or muted or something on the top end. I wish it was a little more sparkle. I mentioned this reviewing the singles leading up to it, but overall, I'm very glad that Iron Maiden does not participate in the loudness war. See my other videos on that. I'm not going to go off on a rant on that now. You hear me rant about that all the time. I'm very grateful that the album is not fatiguing on the ears or anything like that. I wish it had a little more clarity, a little bit more sparkle, but in general, I like it. I also like the guitar, the way the guitars are laid out on this. Now with 3 guitars, sometimes in the past they would just sort of have the third guitar floating around. You'd have one guitar here, left speaker, one in the right, and one kind of floating in between. And that does happen at times on here. But there's a lot of times where it's just, sounds like there's just 2 guitars. And I'm wondering if they took that third guitar and they just blended it right in with one of the other ones. Or maybe they just said, hey, you know what? In a live situation, 3 guitars playing rhythm together makes sense. It beefs everything up. But for the studio, we don't always need that. And so sometimes you just have the 2 guitars, which helps the bass sit real nicely, the bass and the drums right in the middle. Then there are times where there is a third guitar that jumps in with an extra line. And it adds a lot to sort of the mix and what's going on. Again, these long songs, but when there's something sort of jumping in every now and then, and it grabs your attention then, because everything, guitars here, bass, drums, and all of a sudden another guitar comes in the middle, it sort of makes everything get a little bit bigger. It draws you in, it draws your attention. So I really like that. I like the way the guitars were spread out. I also like the sound of the guitars when they soloed. I think the solos on here are great. There were times where there was a lot of reverb on the guitar solos, but it worked. It gave it this real sort of, I don't know, like a atmospheric sound to it that I thought was just really, really cool. Everybody sounds great on this. Nico's drums are great. He puts in a really, I don't want to say restrained, because he has a lot of moments where he has a lot of really cool stuff, but he just seems to pick his spots really well. Steve's bass sounds great. He has a lot of cool lines, and Bruce sounds amazing. What I really like about Bruce here, it sounds to me like you still get the air raid siren moments where Bruce is just up going for it. But he doesn't seem to spend quite as much time up there. And there's a lot more time in sort of this mid-range of Bruce's voice, which I think works really well in these songs, these moody, more darker songs. And then when Bruce goes for it into the air raid siren range, it really elevates everything. Rather than him singing like up in that range all the time, it really helps add a dynamic element to the songs and lift the songs up then. So I really, really dug how Bruce handled his voice on this. All right, let's see here. Also the song variety. There's a nice mixture of variety with different little things going on in these songs. For instance, the opening track, Senjutsu, kind of has this tribal-like drum thing going on here. That's the Steve Harris, Adrian Smith writing combination. Normally you see Adrian and Bruce, but here's Steve and Adrian, and it's got a cool kind of tribal feel to it. It builds really well. It's a great album opener, and it leads really well into Strategio, which was one of the lead-off singles. And in isolation, this song, Strategio, works much better coming out of Senjutsu. It's like it makes sense now, you know? I mean, I'd like this song before, but I'd like it even more now because it flows really, really well, as does Writing on the Wall. I thought that it felt much better in context than hearing them out of context. So you get this nice variety of different things. Like another one that pops in my mind is Lost in a Lost World. Kind of starts with like it's like a clean guitar, an acoustic guitar thing, and the way Bruce is singing in that, I think is really cool. All right, now one thing that I'll be honest, I was worried about is that the long songs on here are all Steve Harris. Most of them are Steve Harris long songs. Okay, the last 3 songs on the album, and I'm going to look here, are Steve songs, and you get 22, 30, you almost get 34 minutes of the last 3 songs. And I got to be honest, I was nervous because I've said this before. I think the strongest songwriting is between Bruce and Adrian at this point in the band. And some of Steve's stuff from the last so many records are not always my favorite, which is a shame because we all know Steve Harris is Iron Maiden. He's the guy that wrote all those classic songs early on. I gotta say though here that the Steve songs, 2 of my favorite songs on here are the Steve songs. And when Death of the Celts came up, I got a little nervous because I was thinking, all right, is this gonna, the Klansmen, is this gonna be a retread type of thing? I loved it. It is maybe one of my favorite Steve songs in, I don't know, I'd have to think about it, but a while. It was just great. And this to me, and now Death of the Celts is 10 minutes and 20 seconds. It works because, and I mentioned the Red and the Black earlier where I got blasted for that because I said it just felt, I love the first part of the Red and the Black, and then it just felt like it was just guitar solos. In this, yeah, there's plenty of guitar solos, but there's all these changes. There's these melodies where the whole band, there's a guitar solo, and then the whole band goes into a new section with like these Celtic-like melodies, Steve up high on his bass, doubling it. And it was like, wow, it was so cool. Then maybe there's another guitar solo, and then the band comes back in with another different type of section thing. So it's a long song, but it has these melodies to keep you engaged. Maybe the Celtic vibe of it reminded me of Thin Lizzy, the song Black Rose, where it's got all these different melodies. That's a long song, but it's got all these melodies, so it keeps you engaged. It's just not guitar solos. And the intro to the song is awesome. It builds really well. It's got all these super cool sections and riffs where the whole band is locked in together. I love the feel of it. The vibe of it is super catchy. Just, wow, absolutely great. Well done. The song that comes after it, The Parchment, is another Steve song. It's the 6, 7, 8, 9 song on the record. This has a different feel, but coming out of Death of the Celts, it just has this cool vibe to it, and it's a little hypnotic. It's kind of repetitive, but there's enough little melodies and changes going on, and it has this hypnotic feel to it that builds really well. I really liked it. Very, very cool. Uh, and I gotta say that, okay, I gotta go back to, I mentioned Bruce earlier. I love Bruce's performance on this. The song Darkest Hour is incredible. This sounds like just Bruce at his best. I almost got a little choked up listening to it, knowing what Bruce has been through since the last record. Uh, Very emotional song, excellent performance from him, great chorus to it. Reminds me of like something that might have been off of one of his solo records. Love it, fantastic. There are two very strong Iron Maiden songs. Darkest Hour, Death of the Celts for me are like, wow. Just, some of the best stuff I've heard them do in quite some time. And the album, I should say though, the only down part for the album for me was the last song, Hell on Earth. It's a Steve song, it's long. When it got there, I was starting to feel fatigued. It reminds me a little bit of Where the Wild Wind Blows. It's a little bit of a bummer that a great album like this, I wish it had gone out on a little bit of a stronger note. But when it ended, I was almost like, is that it? And I was not in a bad way. But going into this, I thought like, man, I hope I can get through all this. An hour and 20 minutes is a lot of music. So when it ended, I was like, is that it? And I looked, I was like, whoa, okay. That's it. It actually went by quickly. An hour and 20 minutes, it felt like it went by pretty quickly. It was only on Hell on Earth, the last song, that it felt like it started to drag a little bit for me. Otherwise, the album, it is again a complaint I've had about their stuff being too long. It went by it felt like it moved and went by quickly for me. So my last thoughts on it, and here I thought this was going to be a quick video. I'm at 17 minutes already, is I'm just so happy that a band like an Iron Maiden, a band that has been around for as long as Iron Maiden, that I've been with for so long, can put out an album like this at this point in their career. An album as strong as this. An album that, they didn't compromise. They didn't say, okay, maybe we should just try to do Run to the Hills and, that over and over and, try to win that fan base over. Iron Maiden has stuck to their guns. They've been doing what they want to do. They've moved into this new phase of their career, their history. It makes me feel proud that they've put out this album. It's it's a genuine album. Nothing sounds contrived on it. Nothing sounds like they're trying to cash in on old glories or anything like that. It seems like an album that really came from them, where they're at right now. And it's just super cool to have a band with their history and legacy being able to put out an album like this and to be here to enjoy it. Amazing. I love it. Gonna have to sit on it a little bit longer to see where it ranks amongst all the other Maiden albums for me, but it was just a great album. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of it. What are your opinions, the good, the bad? What did you like about it? Please let me know in the comments down below. I really look forward to reading that. And until we see you again, up the irons!